Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to our event. Thank you very much to the Ilkley Festival for hosting this event, for their help and support in receiving and making this event possible. This is a micro-commission made by Ilkley Festival. Evocation, painting in words and music, takes you on a journey of Ilkley's beautiful landscapes, past and present. Tonight, we are going to admire 4 photographs taken by the talented Robert Hamilton, who's sitting just there next to me, through the medium of short stories, poems, and flamenco guitar. I will let Robert Hamilton tell you more about his photography, and then we should begin the event. Thank you.
Hi. I'm often asked why I convert my colourful images to black and white. It's not an easy question to answer, certainly not without sounding pretentious anyway. But I'll just throw some thoughts at you. For me, a black and white photograph has a much stronger emotional impact. By removing the colour, we seem to see through to the underneath the surface of things, to a deeper part of the image. We see patterns. Colour can get in the way of what I feel like getting to the soul of the subject. In colour, we see the subject itself. In black and white, we see it a little bit deeper. It helps us to see below that surface to the realm of symbol and metaphor. So I choose to process certain images in mono because I'm trying to look for an evocation of something which is based in experience and memory, your experiences and your memory. So it's not about me, it's not about the landscape, it's about our lives. So the images here tonight will take on imagery more, but I'm hoping they're not so much about the particular, but they're more universal, and we'll find out through what we're here tonight. So it's a huge privilege to have this opportunity to hear and find out through their writing, writers in our group, what emotions it evokes for them, and especially through the music of Samuel here, to find out how these images have spoken to him. So I'll hand you over to our first writer, which is Kayla Herbert, and enjoy it.
Good evening, everyone. So to start off with, I will not be talking about Ilkley more. And I'm glad that Bob mentioned that there's a universal significance to these images. Because confession, I did ask Roxandra for a particular photograph to match a poem that I had already written for a collection of work that will be published next year. So if you want to know more about it, let me know after. So this for me is about mythology and kind of the stories that, specifically in Irish culture, that kind of tell each other, but how those are also kind of parallel and remind me of the stories that I hear around here. You'll guess by my accent that I'm not from here, but I am well aware that Pendle is not in Yorkshire. So I ask if you can, yeah, I know, suspend your geography and step into the mist with me, and we'll go on this journey together. So this one is called My Sister. Songs never lie. So thank you.
Good evening. My name's Roger, and as I often say in our club, and now for something completely different, it's something I've never tried before. I've tried to parody a very well-known writer, 19th century writer. See if you recognise the poem. One autumn night, sun sinking fast, wet, chilled, but at and grumpy, near to home below at last, I paused to stand, as in the past, at Rocky Valley, on a tuffet somewhat lumpy. There was a weirdness on the moor, and something dark and giant beneath me began to roar, a sound I'd never heard before. I chose to be defiant. The giant spoke, more a bellow. Hey up, what's they doing up here, parked out? And they didn't say hello, hardly polite any fellow. I quickly pulled on my skimpy hat. I'd not expect to greet a ghost up here, I said, one I've not met until now. More something I'd expect to see in the Flying Duck, with a beer. Nah, thou not meet 'em there, neither. They left Bob with a vow when name was changed, went up to calf and cow. That's dumb, lad. I'm not just a ghost, but spectre, aristocracy of ghosts, as thou should know. It's set out clear so that I don't boast, set down by that Lewis chap, long ago. So if that doesn't show respect, thou'd better go. Anyhow, what's them on the lugs? A proper hat to keep out midges and be much warmer. They're earphones, I replied, not anti-bugs. And this performance is a stormer. I'm listening to flamenco from an ace Ilkley performer. Flamenco, aye, the knows I've a friend from Ronda. He knows a bit about that style of guitar. Haunts there, usual, but tends to wander. Take a bit more thought to call him up from yonder, but give me a mo and I'll call him from afar. I watched amazed as another spectre began to appear, more colourful, with his glory much brighter. I'm El Tempranillo, why am I summoned here? He said. Your valley is misty and cold and whiter than my El Tejo canyon, and much tighter. Manu Palia likes flamenco, so I thought he'd like to meet you, a notorious bandolero, what knows a thing about that music, and set him right. Though I'm sorry, we don't have here your Andalusian heat. Now I haven't time to tell you the whole story. We'd been given only 4 minutes each. I did think it might get a bit gory, but the bandit was soon out of reach, left quickly, too chilly for him to teach. Anyway, you may not believe my tale. Folks doubt many sightings on Ilkley Moor, and my proof in this photo is admittedly pale, but be warned, that spectre might get very sore if doubted. Be more than just scary, that's for sure. If you don't understand my attempts at Yorkshire dialect, I've got some translations.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here and to have the honour of interpreting these wonderful photos by Rob Hamilton and the wonderful interpretations of those photos by the writers crew. What I particularly loved about this photo is its kind of mystical, haunting beauty. And when I then listened to the writers' interpretations, the thing that I loved is how it conjured the image of mountains and hills, not necessarily just in Ilkley. So what I've composed for you tonight is a flamenco form called a granaína. And a granaína, as the name would suggest, comes from around Granada. So for me, this conjured up the Sierra Nevada mountain ranges and that same haunting, profound atmosphere that we just heard in those wonderful writings. This is a granaína.
In this reading, I'll refer to an Immelman term. Maximilian Immelman, was an airman, pilot in the First World War, an ace. Thank you. I might start again. Did you?
Yes, start again.
It's nice to have a microphone that's switched on, isn't it? In this reading, ladies and gentlemen, I'll refer to an Immelman term. Max Immelman was an airman, a pilot in the First World War, an ace who devised, so he might stay alive, an aerobatic typed turn, which now bears his name. Lovers walk here, dreaming ideals as transient as contrails, or the mallard's rippling wake, which decorates the upturned sky. They walk, those lovers, the meandering path, punctuated by street lamps, remnants from the past, once powered by gas, pressed reluctantly from now vanished gasometer far below. At dusk, those lights, glow a flickering warm light, offering pools of near darkness at wide intervals, where those lovers, so invited, might pause, look around, and kiss. So many lovers, so many futures planned, some to be turned upside down, sky and earth transposed, wrecked by war or some other seeming irrelevance. The town below is knowing, only pretending ignorance, standing back so others may just for now own the space. Expectant fathers stroll impatient, circumnavigating the water, pausing to check the time, light yet another fag, or rekindle a reluctant pipe. For nearby is a building, once St. Winifred's, a maternity hospital, where true Yorkshire folk entered this world to brag, then I was born in Ilkley. What other town provides such a place where magic and dreams might grow unfettered? Of dreams, there are guest houses below, a past hydropath or two, once faint hope for the infirm, where one might imagine lovers might share a room. And overnight, after a fairy tale day, a wedding perhaps, only imagined, invented for the guest book, a promise of stolen hours, moments no future alive could match. And on the morrow, knowing that air kills one while Wharfe kills five, our imaginary lovers might follow so many others to fetch up miles downstream, having stolen through, carried on moonlit ripples in the stillness of the night. So much love, so many dreams, conjured here on this our moorland's edge. But enough, I'm in danger of slipping into melancholia. There are seats for reflected, dedicated to individuals who love this place, inscriptions conjuring images from the past, and reflected flight paths in the water, guidance for immature gulls, each one flying its own practice figure of eights with tight Immelman turns downwind. Mind that tree, to line up on a centre line, a reflected contrail, this time for a perfect landing, only to be instructed by a squawking moorhen, go round. Mallard chicks are on the runway. Perhaps next time. I can imagine these birds as spirits, aviators past, still practicing, always practicing, flying aerobatics to impress or to survive. But who might the robin be, as it flutters from thorn to thorn, keeping visitors company as they stroll the moor side of our lake, singing its heart out as it goes, to the delight of children and the ladies? Who knows? Perhaps that joyous creature is the spirit of the famous, I dare not say well known, Mary Jane. So, dear audience, when next you go there, be calm and sometimes still, as quiet as you can be. Place a lover or just love in your heart, and like me, imagine. Thank you.
name's Jo, and this piece is entitled Reflections. Nell had loved visiting the tarn since she was a little girl, enchanted by the magic within its winter waters. Her brother Tom laughed at her imaginings, as he called them, never keeping still long enough to see what she saw. The first time it happened, Nell was gazing across the tarn, Tom at the other side pulling faces. To make him laugh, she turned around, bent over to look at him upside down through her legs, but was mesmerised by the radiating reflections. Upside down, it became a different world. In the still water, Nell caught sight of a shifting shadow, then another. Keeping still, she concentrated on the shapes moving closer. There were so many whirling darkly beneath the surface. Nell couldn't make out any features, but was certain they were people. Dizzy after being upside down for so long, she stumbled closer to the bank, closer to the underwater figures who, having noticed her, stopped moving, all except one. A sudden splash sent ripples across the water's surface. Tom's stone had broken the stillness, and the bright underwater face had gone. Nell told her brother of the underwater people and how to see them. He flipped himself upside down and took a brief look, but saw nothing. "Sometimes, Tommy, you just need to believe," she said. But Tom didn't want to believe. He wanted his tea. As Nell turned to follow Tom, she saw a man crouching at the water's edge. He held out his hands, and arrows of reflected low sun pointed from the water towards him. Nell shielded her eyes as the light became bright. She squinted but couldn't see the man. And when the light faded, she saw he was gone. In his place, two boys launching a small wooden boat into the tarn, dragging it through on string. Tom returned, interrupting her confusion. "Come on, Nell, I'll get in trouble if I go home without you. Let's race." Tom set off along the path and Nell began to chase him. Head down, she didn't notice the approaching man until they collided, causing him to drop something. A small, wet photograph fell to Nell's feet. She returned it, noticing it was quite old. It pictured two boys at this tarn with a toy boat. "That's me with my brother," the man said. "I come here on his birthday to remember the fun we had. It's a special place for special memories." Remembering not to talk to strangers, Nell ran, catching Tom quickly. As Nell aged, the figures she sought in the tarn appeared only as formless shadows. Perhaps it was imaginings after all, although she never stopped looking. Decades later, on the first anniversary of her brother Tom's death, Nell woke before first light, heavy with sadness. Her mind replayed words she heard many years ago. A special place for special memories. In the early morning, Nell stood at the tarn's edge. Skeletal trees cast shadows over the water, whispering. Feeling slightly foolish, she turned her back to the water, bent over and looked through her legs like a child. The shadows within the water moved towards her. She overbalanced and found herself sat on the bank, arms outstretched. The face from years ago looked out at Nell, opened its mouth, allowing bright water to rise and hover. Nell stood to find she was a child again. "Come on, Nell, let's race," she heard. Reflected in shimmering light, she saw the cheeky boyhood face of her brother Tom and began to chase him. As clouds gathered to cover the sun, the enchantment ended. Nell became aware of the cold ground beneath her and hastily got to her feet. "Imaginings," she muttered and turned to go, just as a stone broke the water's surface.
Those stories were beautiful, and what I found really interesting when I first read them and looked at this is many of the emotions they evoke were the same that I was initially thinking. The idea of lost love, that kind of deep, profound feel that you get. It's a stunning photograph. And the music really wrote itself. It could only be one flamenco form, the cigarilla, the most profound and solemn of all flamenco forms.
Hello everyone, I'm Martin, and my story is about an Ilkley which was and had yet to be. Verbeer's Blessings. Brennan and his group of surviving warriors carefully descended the hillside into the tree line, skeins of mist weaving into a grey veil in the pre-dawn silence. Every 100 paces they paused, listening, alert to the sounds of pursuit. Brennan was thankful to the goddess Verbeer for her cloak of mist, aiding their escape from the pursuing Roman cavalry. They must cross the river, journeying north to the free tribes. Failure meant death or slavery. Brennan's second-in-command Sisel returned from scouting ahead. Legionaries camped on the hill above the river's fording places. It's in full flood and guarded. It won't be easy crossing. Flood or not, they had little choice. Behind them, Roman horsemen, in front, a sleeping legionary camp, and perhaps cold, bored, and tired sentries, weary in the early morning gloom. If the Celts could approach undetected, they could cross the Beers River and into the woods on the north side of the valley, dangerous places for Roman cavalry. Discarding their woolen cloaks, his warriors crawled forward. Brennan had ordered them to avoid battle where possible, concentrating on escape. Verbeer's heavy tears had indeed fallen in the western hills, ensuring her river was high and fast-flowing, hopefully an advantage to the Celts, unencumbered by mail and iron-banded armour. They were only a dozen paces short of the riverbank when the silence was broken by a sentry's anxious challenge. "Now, Briganti, run for your freedom!" roared Brennan. The Celts started forward, Brennan hacking down the startled sentry with his long sword and plunging into the cold river, its fast-flowing waters pulling at his waist and legs. As he waded through the raging torrent, he heard cries of alarm and the deep notes of Roman trumpets sounding warnings to the sleeping camp. Brennan and Sisel dragged themselves out of the water and onto the north bank. From the fog emerged 2 legionaries, javelins raised. Both Celts lunged forward, their swords brought down in slanting arcs, each biting through mail armour and flesh. The congealed air rang to the sound of battle, and screams of pain, all muffled in the swirling greyness. "Don't fight! Run! Run now!" cried Brennan, as he and Sisel ran towards freedom, becoming lost in the enveloping mist. However, 4 of Brennan's warriors allowed bloodlust to overcome them. Yet their disobedience saved their fellow warriors, as the metallic crash of swords and shouts of defiance drew Roman guards like wolves upon fresh meat. Gaius Julius Agricola, the emperor's governor of the province of Britannia, gazed in cold anger at the 6 dead legionaries and 4 dead Celts laid out on the water's edge. Tribune Marcus Gallus waited at a respectful distance. It had been pure coincidence that Agricola had been visiting the camp when the ragged band of Celts had escaped through their lines. "Tribune," said Agricola. "Sir, your orders." "Bury our dead and throw the Celtic scum in the river. I want infantry patrols and 3 squadrons of cavalry away north looking for the barbarians who evaded our sentries. Oh, and I'll see the centurion in charge of last night's incompetent watch immediately. We build a fort here, Tribune, on the hill between the 2 brooks, overlooking the crossing of the river. What's it called? The locals call it Verbeer, sir, after their water goddess. It's said her tears are its source." Agricola was silent long enough to cause unease in the Tribune. She'll weep a lot more tears for her people by the time I'm finished. Tomorrow we march north.
Sorry about that. Can't see a thing. So I take over the story from the point of view of Verbeer. Verbeer watched the fight from afar. She'll cry a lot more tears for her people, of that I'm sure Agricola said.
Actually, he had no idea what would make her cry. Humans had a very distorted understanding of death and feelings, in fact. Webber didn't believe in death because it didn't exist. Not for gods and not for humans, not really. Yes, there were different worlds and different universes, and admittedly some of the bodies the bipeds were sent back into were not always desirable or indeed in prime locations, but they were, technically, alive. Still, they kept being scared of death. Pitiful. In truth, she was incredibly wary of the whole race, especially the Celts and the Romans. Since birth, Webber had roamed the world unencumbered by such human limitations as time and space. She had kissed Zeus in the caves of ancient Greece and swum behind the planet-sized submarines in the 42nd millennia. But as a daughter of the sea, she preferred the cooler Scandinavian waters. She vaguely liked the idea of the Vikings. As humans went, they weren't too bad. They could fight and farm, but more importantly, they feared and respected the sea. However, one particularly fierce fight between Thor and Poseidon had blown her to this raggy isle between the North Sea and the Atlantic. Waiting the battle out, she'd swum upstream and fallen in love with the burning beauty of the moors, the valleys and the rivers. This spot would just be perfect if I put it by the sea, she thought. As a goddess, she could do that sort of thing. She was free to go wherever she wanted, or she had been. But one hazy dawn by a river bend, a handsome young man had been swimming under the surface, and as he held his breath for minutes on end, their eyes had met. Before the sun had burned away the morning mist, they'd had 3 beautiful daughters, Bylje, Saga, and Freya, Freya in Danish. The besotted Webber had been careless, not recognized the Norse god Aegir. She just started an intermythological diplomatic incident. By the time she had realized, the Romans had arrived and named the place Olicana and brought with them Juno and Venus, or as she'd first known them, Hera and Aphrodite. Not good. Both were notoriously jealous and vindictive, and Zeus, as Webber knew, scandalously philandering. Which is probably why they joined forces with Ran, the long-suffering wife of Aegir, and Sif, the wife of Thor. That's a different story. Point is, they ganged up and put a luck curse on her until 100 men had died in this particular river bend. She couldn't leave. And to make matters worse, they had kidnapped her daughters. It was a mess. Again. Webber looked up and watched Agricola and his men. This place was overcrowded. Lazy soldiers at every turn, and more gods than in Asgard and Olympia combined. And it seemed that she was the only one being distracted by the constant droning of wishes and prayers from the earthlings. Shield us with fog, fill the river, stop the rain. The begging was incessant and boring. These puny humans just did not learn. Gods didn't take orders. They were fickle, self-absorbed, and temperamental. They would decide how, when, and indeed if they wanted to help. Webber pondered this. A good bloody battle would really help her quest for freedom and make her able to search for her daughters. So she lifted the fog and leaned back to enjoy the bloodbath to come.
When it came to interpreting this, I loved the story so much, I made it very much a part of what the composition became. We have, I suppose, 3 main sections to this one. We have an introduction, the mist at dawn, as conjured in the first story. And we move swiftly from there into the battle sequence, the Boreria, fast, dramatic. But we've also a transition to a major key, the touch of Huma, from Susie. But first, if you bear with me for one moment, these instruments do not like the heat. I have to do battle with tuning first. Thank you for your patience. I assure you that that wasn't the piece. I'm always grateful at times like that, but I play the guitar, not the harp.
be a little careful going upstairs. I suspect that most of you are from Ilkley or the Wharfe Valley. At least I'm going to assume so. And you're very, very lucky, because you have a guardian angel. Well, he's hardly an angel, the giant Rombold. And Rombold left his mark, the cow and the calf. You know the story, I'm sure. When he leapt over the wharf to get to Armscliffe Crag, he smashed the rock into two, the cow and the calf. But Rombold didn't just leave the cow and the calf for you. He left some little guardians who roamed the moor constantly. And each spring they produce the next generation. So it goes on and on. And you, living in Ilkley and in the Wharfe, will always have, therefore, Rombold and his little helpers. This is how they go. Startlingly, they appear to skip from looming rock to leaden gorse, till now bereft of spark. These spindle-legged, flop-eared woollikins, new sprouted from a matriarchal gloom. How could those mat-haired dugbags conjure up such freshly laundered coltish loons, pure English lamb's wool, Zebedean sprung? Yet they've emerged, all knees and ears, guzzling in pit-stop paws, only, it seems, to fuel another zigzag, dizzying chase. While Mother, exuding sheepish pride, warns off admirers high on eulogy with yellow stare and door hinge creak. Giddy, maybe, destined for breeding, or the knife, and too soon swollen by herbivorous greed, yet innocent and fresh, right now in spring. Sprung forth across the moor, they banish winter's lingering woes with sweetening breath of spring. And there you have them. They're yours. They will always be yours. They're there for you. They're Rombold's creation.
Bear with us a minute, please, while we make an adjustment.
Am I on? Ooh, yes, I am. This story is called Happy Jack Enlightens Reverend Blade by James Brown. Happy Jack leant on the mission house wall, puffing on his clay pipe, while he considered an imposing rocky outcrop on Ilkley Moor known as the Cow and Calf. No matter how hard he squinted, the giant boulder that had split and rolled from the main rock appeared more like the mythical chunk of clay Prometheus created man from than a calf. He was disturbed by Reverend Blade, Ilkley's young incumbent vicar, arriving to take his first mission house service. "A veritable good morning to you, Happy Jack," the vicar sang, and leant on the wall beside the navvy. "You know, Jack, you really can't blame Ilkley's townsfolk for getting swept up in the European clamour for super high-speed connections to railway promises, and then being utterly terrified when thousands of illiterate navvies turn up to build it." Jack's gaze didn't flinch from the boulder. "Can't have one thing without t'other," he answered, and nodded at the rock. "That's a holy place, that is. Got immortal powers, it has. I never had you down. I never thought you'd believe in folk tales, Happy Jack." The vicar laughed, glancing at the navvy's leathery hands and weathered face. "And I," Jack replied, "never thought I'd see a churchman like you so far from a church." But touched by the preacher's manner, added, "Now, you see, lad, many years ago, long before your man Jesus Christ walked upon this earth, there were a great flood here in Wharfe. Week after week the rain poured down like the world were coming to its end, it did." Jack punched his fist hard into his palm to show the force of water smashing into bridges. Floods washed away people's homes and drowned most of their livestock, and they fled, panicking, to the heights. "If this flood was so long ago," the vicar cried, his eyes widening at an idea, "it may have been the same flood that Noah built his ark to save the animals in the Old Testament story." "Could be," Jack nodded, his own eyes sparkling at the vicar's idea. "Could very well be. The River Wharfe became an ocean, and the only land visible was Ilkley Moor with his cow and calf, and the Otley Shevin. The only survivors were the ones clinging to these rocks. When the rain stopped and the waters dropped, the survivors trudged back and rebuilt their homes, and I'm just advising you, sir, that the folks that live in this valley are descendants of those few survivors, and that is why, even thousands of years after the Great Flood, Wharfedale folk trust the solid rocks and hills of nature over the uncertainties of religion." "So I surmise," said the vicar, "that these hills must seem to the local folk like Mount Ararat did to Noah." "Could be," said Jack. "Could very well be." After the Reverend had scurried away, Jack felt a hand on his shoulder. "I overheard that tale, our Jack," said Dusty Tom, Jack's tunnelling mate. "Is it true?" Happy Jack gave his friend a triumphant grin. "Could be, Tom," he said, his eyes sparkling mischievously. "Could very well be."
What I loved about this photograph and the two interpretations we just heard is how you can really hear how you can have so many interpretations of the same thing, so many different ideas, as was marked beautifully in that last story we just heard. So for the final musical evocation, I decided to play for you a flamenco form called a sevillana. Now when composing a sevillana, there are 4 separate sections to it. Each one is called a sevillana, and collectively they make the whole sevillana. Each one has a very abrupt stop at the end, but don't worry, there is a nice big bang at the end of the last one, so you know when it will come. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure sharing the stage with these wonderful writers and the works of Rob as well. Thank you very much.
yet. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to our event, but please give a round of applause for those wonderful people who are staying at the back, the Ilkley Festival staff and volunteers. Thank you very much. Thank you, and I hope you're going to have a lovely evening and night. Thank you.